Well, as promised, Nicole will join you in a couple of moments with sports news, great news as well if you're an Arsenal fan. But before we get to her, COVID-19 hammering livelihoods globally, especially here in South Africa. Look at our unemployment rates already. Companies being forced to retrench employees and the companies themselves even having to completely shut down in some cases. But perhaps you want to start the new year with some hope and hope for better opportunities. So how do you bounce back into employment after being retrenched? Or perhaps you want to just change your career. COVID-19 has forced you to rethink things. Career coach and industrial psychologist Phiona Martin joining us here on the South African Morning. Hello to you, Phiona. All the best for 2021, by the way. And last year, certainly changing a lot of people's jobs if they were lucky enough to keep their job. How do you bounce back after the retrenchments a lot of people experienced last year?
Good morning, Gareth, and thank you so much for having me. I think before I talk about bouncing back, I just want to touch on the psychological effects of job loss, particularly on affected individuals. You know, job loss, irrespective of whether it was a retrenchment or the company closed down, is one of the most devastating traumas that an individual can experience. It's actually considered one of the top 10 traumas. And in fact, it's likened to, the experience of going through a divorce or going through a loss, in the form of death of a loved one. So I think for me, as well, our jobs in many cases form part of our identity. And when a part of your identity is removed from you, many people go through experiences of, loss of self-worth, loss of self-esteem. And even though retrenchment is usually not a fault of the individual, there's often a sense of personal failure. People feel violated, they feel betrayed by the organization. And the reason I'm highlighting this, Gareth, is because it's important to allow yourself time to go through the grieving and the mourning process, if you have undergone a retrenchment or a job loss. And that's very important because you need all the mental fortitude that you can possibly get, because the job search on its own is a very difficult and often an experience or basically a skill that requires a lot of your emotions, a lot of your time, and a lot of your energy. So your wellness is very important as a precursor to that. So in terms of bouncing back, one of the important elements about bouncing back is that the longer you remain unemployed, unfortunately, it becomes more difficult to get back in the job market. So shortening that duration of employment is very important for job seekers. And the one tip that I can give around that is, if you find that you have lost your job, you pretty much go from, being fully employed, where you've got a routine, where you're going to work every day, and you become fully unemployed, where you've got all this time on your hands. So one of the things that research has found to increase your chances of getting a job is having a job search plan. And the things that a plan can do for you, one, it gives you a form of structure. Gareth, it's often very overwhelming to wake up and suddenly you have nothing to do, right? So that structure gives you a sense of where you're going to focus your efforts. It also gives you a sense of optimism and hope, particularly where you're setting yourself weekly targets around your job search, right? And, if you're able to tick that off, it gives you a sense of optimism, it gives you a sense of hope, and it also helps to direct your efforts. The opposite of that is something that's called, pray and spray. So this is where people just haphazardly are applying for jobs willy-nilly. Sometimes it's once a week, sometimes it's a couple of times a week. So I think it's very important to have what is referred to as a smart search, and you can get that through having a job plan.
Phiona, let's talk a little bit about those who are still fortunate enough to have jobs. The entire work structures of last year, how people are doing their jobs. Never before would our bosses allow us to do our jobs from home and online. And I think many people may have developed new skills, perhaps now, Phiona, even thinking, well, maybe I can go and do that fun job that I always wanted to. My last question to you briefly, if you don't mind, is now the time, do you think, and how would you motivate someone to perhaps go after that online job, that new job that they've always wanted to go after? Is now the time for change, do you think? Do you think people are ready for it?
Look, I mean, absolutely. I think whether it's time for a career change or not, there's a lot of, I think, personal elements that one has to look into. But I think certainly, Gareth, the world has opened up. Whereas before you were restricted to working in the particular, city or location where you have been, now because of the uptake and, people's increasing appetite, to have fully virtual workers, it actually opens up your opportunities globally where you don't even have to be in that particular country to work. So I certainly think where there's an opportunity for you to explore that, by all means, through a structured and, of course, through a plan, do that.
All right, and I appreciate your time and some fantastic advice as well. Got a lot of energy this time of the year. She goes into 2021 is our Phiona Martin from Talent Meridian. My thanks to her, industrial psychologist and career coach. It's not about not taking the risks, as Phiona says. It's about